To Sudan, where fighting between the army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Force shows no sign of ending after the failure of the latest ceasefire. Bodies are reported to be lining the streets of the capital and thousands of civilians are fleeing. The airport is closed and supplies of food, water and medicine are running out. At least 270 people have been killed since violence broke out on Saturday.
The Sudanese capital on the River Nile feels like a ghost town. A latest attempt at a ceasefire between the army and a paramilitary force has failed. The head of the army and his deputy, the head of the RSF, have shared power in Sudan since 2021 and signed a deal with political parties in December 2022 to forge a path towards civilian rule. However, they disagree on key issues, and these tensions erupted into fierce clashes on Saturday. For the city's residents, the situation is becoming more and more precarious. Bread is in short supply in large parts of the capital. Doctors report that many clinics are lacking crucial medical supplies, which are being blocked by the warring parties.
People can't move to hospitals, ambulances cannot reach people at homes. There is a delay to the really needed adequate medical care. And that's Khartoum, when we have a little bit of infrastructures. Unfortunately, that's even worse for places outside of Khartoum.
Remaining here isn't an option for many Sudanese. But with little hope for a quick end to the fighting, they likely won't be returning home anytime soon.
OK, we can talk to Alyona Sinenko, who's a spokesperson for Africa with the International Committee of the Red Cross. She joins us from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Welcome to DW. Can we start with the humanitarian impact of these last 5 days of violence?
The humanitarian impact has been disastrous, and it's just getting worse with every hour that this uninterrupted fighting continues, because people are on the verge. They're running out of food, running out of water, they're terrified. They're all the injured, and the ambulances, the medical personnel cannot reach them. Also, medical staff cannot reach hospitals. Yesterday, I spoke with one of our colleagues from the Sudanese Red Crescent Society, and what he told me was just disturbing. He said that his biggest fear is that the medical system will collapse, and then we can expect the worst.
And so can you give us an idea of how many people are now trying to flee the fighting and where they might be going?
Well, it is very difficult to speak about numbers, about precise numbers, because our teams, just like the rest of the population in the capital Khartoum, they're sheltering in place because the fighting has been extremely intense, very close to the populated residential neighborhoods, and they cannot move around to give you the accurate estimates. What is extremely worrying is that if you look at the larger region, Sudan itself has been the place where refugees were fleeing from other countries in the region facing instability. It has over 1 million refugees, which is one of the largest refugee populations in Africa. So now, if you look around at other countries around Sudan, you can also ask yourself where these people are going to go.
And so why do you think these ceasefires keep failing?
Well, I think that all those people who are involved in the fighting, they would be better placed to answer this question. For us, we're a humanitarian organization. So what we are looking at are the humanitarian needs, and the humanitarian needs are growing by the minute. And this is why continuously we are calling in bilateral conversations through humanitarian diplomacy and publicly for respect of the international humanitarian law, because they do have an obligation to provide this humanitarian space for civilians to be able to resupply, for ambulances and humanitarian workers to be able to reach people in need.
There does seem to be scant regard for the laws of war, if I can put it that way. As I understand it, the fighting is not limited to enemy combatants, but also they're attacking hospitals, civilians and even aid workers.
what is happening is that the fighting has been very intense and happening very close to densely populated residential areas. And we are seeing in Sudan, as well as we've seen in other places around the world, how dangerous and devastating this is for the civilian population, because the essential civilian infrastructure is getting damaged. Civilian homes are getting damaged. So now you have civilian population who have gone for days, basic essential services, without electricity, water, without access to healthcare. And this situation is going to get worse if there is no humanitarian space, if there is no pause and no regard for the international humanitarian law.
We thank you for sparing us the time and wish you well with your efforts. Alyona Sinenko from the International Committee of the Red Cross, thank you again.
Thank you.
And we can now get more on this from journalist and political analyst Patrick Oyet. He's based in Juba in neighbouring South Sudan. Welcome to DW. Let's start with the latest you're hearing from Sudan.
Yeah, the latest we are hearing from Sudan is that fighting is still ongoing. At night, last night, there was a moment when it was quiet and there was hope that that quietness would continue, but unfortunately it did not. So there were reportedly Egyptian troops who were pilots, basically training Sudanese pilots. They had been caught up in the fight. And actually, we were told that last night they were moved to Khartoum. And we were also told that they were evacuated. So there was a moment in which the fighting actually was not there. But thereafter, they immediately, the parties that are fighting began fighting again, and fighting is continuing up to now.
Right. And this, I think, is the second ceasefire to fail. What seems to be the problem?
Yes, this is the second ceasefire that is failing. There is a thinking among many Sudanese people that both sides in the fighting believe that they can actually gain some ground. The other thinking is that at least maybe somebody will win. So those are the things that will are making really these parties not to obey the ceasefire, because one side thinks I may win the fighting outright. Another one thinks maybe I should first gain more ground so that when we begin negotiations, then I am having an upper hand. So those are possibly the reasons as to why the fighting is really not stopping.
Right, so it doesn't look like this is going to stop. And I keep hearing people say that this could spiral into a civil war. What would that look like?
Yeah, this doesn't look like it will stop, first of all, because of, the claims and counterclaims. For example, the Sudan Armed Forces will tell you we are in control of, 90% of the city. And then the Rapid Support Forces will say, no, it's not true. We are in control of 70%. So there are those kinds of, claims and counterclaims. So everybody wants to show that they are in control of something. That's very bad, because it doesn't really, allow even mediators who are willing to mediate to come in. And of course, it is likely to become a civil war because of many reasons as well. Number one is the number of people now affected by the war is very big, or the fighting for that matter. Maybe it has not yet reached war, is very big. Then the people also whose life, we are losing are also, the number is growing. Another complication is there's so many armed groups in the Sudan. In Darfur, for example, we have armed groups that have never joined the government. In the southern part of Sudan, in Blue Nile, in South Kordofan, in Nuba Mountains, you also have armed groups. And the problem is that those armed groups have their leaders in Khartoum. And as fighting is going on in Khartoum and other parts of the country, if anything happens to any of their leaders, maybe they are injured or something, and they receive this information, they are likely to also join. So it becomes a civil war and spread across the country.
Wow. OK, thank you for outlining that so clearly and for joining us. Patrick Oyet, a journalist and political analyst.